everyone. Welcome to part 2 of ODNR's webinar series. We're really happy to have you join us again today. My name is Alyssa Yapel, and I'll be one of your moderators today. So please, throughout the event today, utilize the Q&A box that you have available to you to ask questions. I will try to ask our presenters today, or Jenna will try and ask our presenters the questions that you send in to us. So once again, just please utilize that Q&A. We love to get questions from the viewers throughout. So now I want to introduce you to my amazing co-workers from our Division of Parks and Watercraft. You may remember Jenna Winters from last week's webinar, if you were able to join us then. And Jenna's going to be helping me with that Q&A and being a moderator today as well. And then I have our presenters, Mandy Wolski, who works at Cowan Lake State Park. You may also remember her from our first part of Ohio Protects Pollinator series last week. And a new member joining us is Cindy Orth. And Cindy is from Pymatuning State Park. So we're very excited to have Cindy. And I have to say, I'm particularly excited because we just found out that Cindy may have taught me at a land lab when I was younger. So these virtual series like this are super cool for us to connect all over the state, for all of us working at ODNR, and connect with you. So I will hand this off to Mandy now, and we'll begin. So here we go.
Hi, everyone. I am not at the lake today. We were afraid the weather was going to be horrible, just like last week. So I'm coming to you from my house. Today we want to start out with a quiz. We want to know if you know what a butterfly emerges from.
And Mandy, I am going to put that question for everyone in the Q&A. So it is coming to you right now. And if you guys go to that link, we can check out the answers in just a bit.
Wonderful. Well, my first part of our presentation today is about metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is basically just the change that a butterfly has to go to become a butterfly. And our butterflies go through 4 stages of life. Our first stage that our butterflies start out at is the egg. So here I have 2 different kinds of eggs. Every butterfly is different, but some lay single eggs, some lay these eggs in big groups, like the pipevine swallowtail here. And then their next stage of life is when they become the larva. When they hatch from that egg, they are a caterpillar. As caterpillars, they're going to eat and eat, and then they are going to continue to grow. And all the caterpillars can look just as different as all of the eggs. So here are a couple that we have in Ohio. The next stage that they go through is the pupa stage. So for us as butterflies, for those butterflies, their pupa is inside of a chrysalis. So for those of you who answered chrysalis instead of cocoon for that question at the beginning, you were correct. On these 2 chrysalises, you can see that their wings are starting to show through. So on the monarch one, you can start to see some orange in the wing veins, and on the zebra swallowtail, you're starting to see the colors of that butterfly as well. So the last stage of the butterfly's life is when they actually come out of the chrysalis and they emerge as these beautiful butterflies. There are over 130 species of butterflies and skippers in Ohio. There's no way we have enough time for that, but here are a few that I love to see during the summer here in Ohio. So that is just 4 stages of their life. When it's done, guess what happens? These adult butterflies start the process over by laying more eggs. So the next question I have for you, Alyssa, if you want to bring that up, I'm going to stop sharing. And Alyssa, if you want to bring up the first question, which is which one is the monarch caterpillar?
Okay, 1 second.
So monarch
I think I'm just gonna send that question again in the forms, Mandy. Sorry.
That's okay. So this one's going to be a little tricky, but think about the monarch caterpillar and do your best at guessing which one you believe it is. The next question is going to be which one is the monarch butterfly. That one's even more of a trick, but pay close attention to every single one of them, and I'm sure you can figure it out. So for our next segment, I'm going to pass you on to naturalist Cindy from Pymatuning State Park, and she's going to talk with you guys about how she raises monarchs at her home.
Actually, hey, Mandy, before we hand it to Cindy, just real quick, I just wanted to let you know that we have some super smart viewers out there because everybody got the first question correctly. Which of these does a butterfly emerge from? So I just wanted to let you know that. And then for the caterpillar, same thing. Apparently we have some very intelligent viewers because they got the question about the monarch caterpillar correct as well.
Well, so, Cindy and I thought we were going to throw some people off with our caterpillar picks. So wonderful. Good job, everyone.
And so I'll put Cindy up here now, and I think she's on mute, but she'll come off mute here in just a second and she'll be with you. There we go.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be out here today with you. I started my interest in butterflies a very long time ago, but I began to raise butterflies 9 years ago. And the reason I began that, well, first of all, that year was very hard on my husband and I. We had his mom in the hospital that previous year with in a coma for several weeks. We found out that my brother-in-law had a brain tumor called a glioblastoma, which would kill him in short order. We found out my mom had her 3rd bout with breast cancer and had to have a double mastectomy. And then about 2 weeks before I started this process of raising butterflies, my dad passed away unexpectedly. So it still brings tears to my eyes, but the story of raising monarchs really helped my husband and I through that summer. So the way it began was one early July morning, a friend of mine called Butterfly Lori in my phone directory called me to ask me to go out and look for monarch eggs with her. I asked her if my husband could come along, and she said, absolutely. So the 3 of us, dressed with long pants, high boots, and bug spray, headed out into the fields. In about, well, several hours, we picked up about 30 eggs and a half a dozen to a dozen little tiny caterpillars. And we headed home with our booty split between the 2 families. My husband and I set up several aquariums, large and small, and began our experiment. So every day we would have to clean out the frass. That's the butterfly poop for those of you that don't know. And we had to mist our babies, and we had to transfer them to less crowded conditions as they grew. So every day we did this several times a day. We were both interested in watching our jaying caterpillars, which after they have been a caterpillar for about 2 weeks, they climb somewhere high. And in the aquariums, it was the lid of the aquarium because they couldn't get out. and they would form a J in the air. Once they were in that J, they would hang that way for about a day. And it always seemed like before that, I missed the opportunity to see them turn into a chrysalis. But one morning, my husband said, I'm making omelets and we're going to sit in front of these aquariums and watch it happen. And we were lucky enough to see the J drop down into a straight line caterpillar, very limp looking. The antennas were just dangling. And then they began to shake violently. And within a minute, they were in a chrysalis. It was amazing. That skin just raised right up the caterpillar's body, and underneath was the chrysalis. It took about a minute or so for the initial part, and then another half an hour, and it was the green chrysalis with the yellow or golden flecks that we all know so well. So then at the same time, because that year we had them in 2 different stages, because we had the babies or the eggs and the caterpillars at the same time, we began to watch them coming out of the chrysalis a couple weeks later. And we would hear that crack of the chrysalis shell if we were close enough. And then pretty soon that butterfly would drop out, dangle, and the wings would begin to be filled with the fluid and get strong enough for that butterfly to fly. Now, for the 2 of us that summer, that project was new life for us. It was our saving grace. It was our salvation, really, from the hard trials that we had endured the previous year. And it became a passion of ours, and we've been continuing that now for 9 years. It's a mystery what happens inside that chrysalis. I'm sure there's some scientists out there among all of you that know exactly how that happens. But for myself, it remains a mystery, a wonderful example of something that's transforming without our knowledge of how it's happening. I like mysteries. So that's how I got started. And now I want to show you how you can get started as well. So I have some of my supplies with me. This would be a pretty simple aquarium that you can get. Can you all see it? Shake your heads if you can, ladies. Okay. This is about a medium-sized aquarium, but they do come a little bit larger than this and smaller than this. And this is just one example of an aquarium that you could use. I think a shoebox would work as well. I would put a little screened panel in a shoebox if I was to use that. I also, at the beginning, was using fish aquariums, 10-gallon fish aquariums, which I would turn on their side and then have a screen that I could remove to replace the leaves and remove the frass. So I've tried a lot of different methods over the years, and every one of them has been successful. So I start with this aquarium. I'll go out and collect eggs or small caterpillars. I'll show you those in a minute. And then I would get a paper towel, and I would, usually I double these paper towels up, and I would just spritz it with a little bit of water. You don't want this to be sopping wet, but you want a little bit of water on there so it's damp, and you'll lay it in the bottom of your aquarium. So I have it in the bottom here. And then I would put my leaves with my eggs or my caterpillars on them, and of course keep track of what's happening. Now, once those eggs are about ready to hatch, they look like a little blackhead. That's about the size they are. It's the head of a pin is how big those little eggs are. So they look like a blackhead, so I know it's time for them to hatch. As small caterpillars, they're about like an eyelash, so it's really hard to see them at first. So you have to be real careful with your aquariums, and if you don't want to lose those caterpillars, you've got to really almost use a magnifying glass to see them. That is basically what you do. Just make sure that every day you're taking the paper towel out with the frass or caterpillar poop on it, shaking that off into your flower bed, of course, because that is a good fertilizer, and adding new fresh leaves to the aquarium. Now, occasionally I do use a pair of scissors to cut if the leaf that the egg is on is starting to dry, or the little caterpillar needs to move to a next leaf, I will cut most of the leaf that it's on away so it will happily move over to a good new leaf. I also started this last year. I have these 2 pieces of styrofoam that are poked with holes. So I'll take the plant, either the top, the flower top of it, or the leaf, and stick it right into these holes. And then underneath here is water so that those leaves will stay fresh as the eggs are hatching till they're done hatching. So that works also to keep the eggs and the babies out of the water. You don't want those babies in the water. So as those caterpillars grow and grow, of course, you do not want them socially intermingling. They need to socially isolate, just like we do right now. These particular kind of butterflies lay 1 egg per plant in ideal conditions. So they normally don't interact with each other until they become butterflies again and they're mating. So you don't want to have a crowded aquarium. You just want just a couple of caterpillars at the most in a larger aquarium so that they don't spread disease to each other. That is what it's a very close analogy to what's going on in our world today. So keep them separate and watch them grow. Make sure to go outside with an omelet. Oh, by the way, all my aquariums are outside when I'm raising the caterpillars. They're on the east side of the house. They get a little bit of morning sun and then they're in shade. I don't want them in the hot sunshine, because you have to realize that when they're out there in nature, they're on the underneath side of a plant eating the leaf from the underside. So they've always got their shade above them. So why do I choose monarchs? There's plenty of butterflies out there that we could choose, but monarchs are kind of a flagship species. They are the species that we all know and love because they're the migrators. And if you're planting and caring for monarchs, you're really providing for all the other species as well, because the monarch adult is a generalist. They go to a lot of different flowers for pollen. But as Mandy will tell us shortly, those flowers are the host plants for other caterpillars. So I'm going to just talk briefly about that. You have host plants, which are called larval plants, or you have adult plants, which are called nectar plants. You want to be able in your garden to provide both larval plants and nectar plants, because a butterfly will visit your garden aplenty if you have nectaring plants, but if you want to have them stay, you need to provide food for their babies. So that's why you want to plant native larval plants for your caterpillars. Now, I also chose butterflies because I have this little ditty that goes through my head all the time, and it's just a refrain of a song. I think the writer of the song was Alex Bevan, and this song was called The University of Biodiversity. So I'm just going to share the refrain with you. It's the University of Biodiversity. You might think I'm nutty as a squirrel. It's the University of Biodiversity, but you can call it the world. Connections, connections, every little thing's entwined. Connections, connections are what I'm hoping to find. And with monarch butterflies, we've got a lot of connections. So I know I have a zillion more things I could talk about, but I'm going to switch it back to Mandy. And if we have more time at the end, I'd be happy to jump in or definitely answer questions. Go ahead, Mandy.
All right. Cindy, I loved that. I wish our parks were closer so we could spend more time together with butterflies outdoors.
Right.
Mandy,
I forgot that one story too. So later, let me go back to it about, what else? Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to go now?
Well,
talk about milkweed?
Yeah, I can.
Go for it.
Okay, so the connection, the whole connection thing, I discovered after we began to, raise the monarchs at our home, rather than go out to the fields to find milkweed. We decided we have to have it in our yard. We probably had it in our yard prior to that point, but had not raised butterflies yet. And so we started planting milkweed in our yard. Within a year or so, the milkweed was doing awesome. And milkweed attracts a whole host of other species of things. Everything loves milkweed. Well, not everything, because it is a poison. It's a toxin, but bees love it. And I would go out and stand in our milkweed patch and just listen to the bees. It was glorious. Well, shortly thereafter, our apple trees were so full of apples that the branches were breaking off of them. Now, at that point, we had lived at our house for 20 years or more, and we had very few apples ever at any time. And after we had milkweed, our apple trees started producing really, really well. So I am certain, although not scientifically, I can't claim it scientifically, but I believe those bees that were attracted to that milkweed ended up doing us a big favor with our apple trees.
Hey, Cindy, we have a question that I wanted to ask. Oh, okay. Or Mandy, sorry. I think it switched to Mandy on the screen. Either of you. Dory from Mansfield says, "You're doing a great job. So interesting. Can you touch the caterpillars with your hands?"
Oh, that is a very good question. We do occasionally have our students touch the caterpillars, but as somebody that raises them, I try to touch them as little as possible. I want to have everything as natural as it can be. Now, it could be more natural if I left them in the garden. Of course it could, but the rate of success of monarch butterflies left on their own, it's about 80 to 90% that fail because of predators or other problems. And in keeping my butterflies, I kept a little book with all my records every year. And my book, keeping records, I realized that my book matched up, my records matched up with the national and international records. And in 2013, I had 13 monarchs that I raised. And internationally, we had only two or 3 hectares of land, which is a couple of acres of land in the oil mill forests that had monarchs in them after 40 years prior to that. So back to the question, I prefer not to touch them when I'm raising them, except to let the monarch butterfly on my finger as I move him from the aquarium to the flowers so they can fly on their own. Mandy, you can add something different if you like, for sure.
I know that when I have the monarchs at the park, if I have a small group of people and there's not going to be 100 hands touching the caterpillars, sometimes I will get one of the big monarch caterpillars that's almost ready for chrysalis and let a couple people have it crawl on their hand. But at the same time, I have to remember we all have germs, which we have learned recently. So when I do that, it's only just a few of the kids, and I don't let them like grab a hold of them. I just kind of set it on the hand and let it, move a little bit. That is just best for the caterpillar. And like you said, Cindy, when I am changing out their milkweed leaves in the aquarium, I just leave the bit of leaf that they're on and put it on top of the new fresh leaf. So they don't all get touched. Most of the time I'm trying not to touch, but there is something to be said about education and hands-on education and it really sticking with you. Alyssa, do we have other questions? You're muted.
Sorry. I was going to save some of them for the end unless you want me to ask another question before your second part of the. No, okay. Somebody had asked, do all eggs look the same? Do all butterfly eggs look the same?
That is a good question. I have seen butterfly eggs that were bright red. I have seen butterfly eggs that were pale white. I've seen them yellow. I've seen them a long, thin egg, like for the sulfurs. It's still tiny thing, but it's very long compared to some other eggs. I've seen eggs that are more round in shape, some that look like a chicken egg, and they can be different colors and different shapes. Cindy, have you seen any that are really interesting?
Well, I don't know that I'd necessarily even want to talk about that, but I just really do want to say that every particular kind of butterfly and moth has its own unique egg. So the egg of a monarch can only become a monarch, and it only looks like itself. It doesn't look like, so yes, Mandy's seen a lot of eggs. I've seen a lot of different kinds of eggs as well. And as she said, some butterflies will lay all of their eggs in one spot, where the monarch really wants to protect itself, so it lays its eggs on different plants. So yes, the eggs are different for different species.
Okay, back to you, Mandy. Did you have some host plants maybe that you were going to talk about?
I do. So as Cindy was talking, she was feeding her monarchs milkweed. And I don't know if my mom and dad got logged in today or not, but when I was a kid, Dad would have me go out to the fence and out to the meter for our electric, and I would have to pull this milkweed vine off of that fence and off of the meter. And now I'm older and I still can't get Dad to grow milkweed in his yard for the monarchs. It's just something he was always told to get rid of. So one of these days I'm going to change his mind. So for Cindy and I, when we're raising monarchs, we have to give them milkweed. We can't go out to the garden and get some black-eyed Susan leaves and try to feed them that. They won't eat them. And that milkweed is special to them. Their moms specifically look for that milkweed to lay the eggs on. And that's how all caterpillars and moths, they look for the plant called the host plant, like Cindy was talking about. And I have some really beautiful photos, but I brought the park home with me today, and I wanted to share some things with you. So at Cowan Lake, we get seeds and we grow our native flower seeds in tiny little, their own little greenhouses. So this was probably some chocolate, some eggnog, some cinnamon eggnog from Christmas. We saved this and we planted seeds in there, and over winter, this little greenhouse did its job, and now we have Heath Aster, which is one of the host plants we're going to talk about today. So this Heath Aster is going to get transplanted into the park to make more habitat for butterflies and moths. I also brought home the one that Cindy was talking about. Now I have to use a big gallon for this because it is for my monarchs. So in this one, we have a bunch of common milkweed. So this common milkweed is just starting out. It looks really good in this container. And I'm going to get this transplanted very soon. It'll go into slightly bigger containers until it has a nice root, and then it's being planted at the park. One of the other ones we are going to talk about is the golden Alexanders. And now this plant does not look like this right now in full growth. Outside my house, I have blooms starting to, it's ready to open down here in Southwest Ohio. And I know Cindy and I were talking, and her plants are not this far yet. So I've never seen golden Alexander this tiny. And I thought for a while that all I grew was weeds, but it turns out I have it right. I was able to talk to a friend, and I do have the right plants growing in this container. So with milkweed, There are 17 different species of milkweed in Ohio, but the monarchs will only eat 13 of those species. I do have some butterfly weed in my box down here, and we've got world milkweed, common milkweed, swamp milkweed, purple milkweed, green milkweed, and each of them has their own beautiful flower. And Cindy and I were talking, and we think that the common milkweed should be a perfume. That is how good that plant really smells. And to be in a whole field of that milkweed and smell it, it's an amazing scent. But each of our plants has a purpose. So I'm going to share with you some of these native plants. If I can figure out how to share, here we go. So I want to start with this wild columbine. So our wild columbine is this red and yellow. It's a beautiful plant. Right now it's already blooming at Cowan, and we're going to get some frost. So I'm not sure how long that's going to last. But the columbine is a host to a columbine dusky wing. And this means that this adult dusky wing is going to find the columbine plants and lay their eggs on this plant so that when their caterpillars hatch out of the egg, this is what they are going to eat. Another one is one that if you walked outside right now in your yard, you may find one of these species of violet. So in Ohio, we actually have roughly 27 species of violet. This one is the downy yellow violet. I do have this in my yard. I also have a very pretty purple violet. And at Cowan Lake, we have one that is a white violet with really pretty purple lines on it. So this great spangled fritillary is just one of the butterflies that lay eggs on these violet species. There are 9 different fritillaries in Ohio, and that means that they are all sharing these different violets to grow their young on. This great spangled is probably one of the most beautiful. It's larger. We also have a meadow and a variegated fritillary that I see quite often. The rest of them, they're not as normal to see, and they are, I believe there are even some that might be on that threatened list, and then we should keep our violets in our yard to help them out. So this one is a black-eyed Susan. This is one of the ones that many people would love to have in their yard. It's a beautiful plant. It flowers. If you take those little flower heads off when they are done blooming, it will grow more flowers throughout the summer and slightly into the fall, depending on what part of Ohio you're in. And it is host to the silvery checker spot. The silvery checker spot is one that it is not always going to lay on black-eyed Susan. Other host plants that it likes to use is the wing stem and the Helianthus species, which are Ohio's native sunflowers. Recently, some studies have shown that the silvery checker spot is even starting to lay eggs on the purple coneflower, which is what you see him this one nectaring from on the right side of your screen. So this one doesn't have a specific larval host. This one will use what their caterpillars aren't as picky of an eater. One of the most beautiful butterflies I get at Cowan Lake is the zebra swallowtail. This zebra swallowtail is nectaring from butterfly weed, which is one of our native milkweeds. So even though this milkweed is something that the butterfly larva, the caterpillar of the monarch, is going to eat, that doesn't mean that its nectar is only for those monarchs. So we see a lot of different things, as Cindy said, with her yard, with the bees going to her milkweed. So it's not just flowers that our butterflies will lay their eggs on. There are a whole wide variety of trees that butterflies and moths will lay their eggs on. The zebra swallowtail, its caterpillar will only eat the leaves of our native fruit, the pawpaw tree. These swallowtails are very tricky to raise. They are not as simple as monarchs. They do not like these big full leaves of the pawpaw tree. They want the new growth, the very tender leaves that are just emerging on that tree. And if you try to feed one of these caterpillars, one of these huge leaves, it's going to turn its nose up and walk away. So if you've ever had a garden in your backyard and you tried to grow dill or carrot or fennel or parsley, you may have had black swallowtails laying eggs on your food. That's not good. You need that food to eat. So your native flower that these black swallowtails will lay their eggs on is called the golden Alexander. It's in the carrot family, just like your parsley, your carrot. They also lay on Queen Anne's lace. So if you have a garden and your food is getting eaten by caterpillars, look for that black swallowtail, especially if you need that. If you would like to have that parsley for your meals, you may have to plant some golden Alexander in there amidst your herbs so that you can move those caterpillars from your food to the golden Alexander. So the Heath Aster was one of the ones that I talked to you guys about and I showed you in my little containers. This one is very, very important. It kind of combines what Cindy was saying about helping her monarchs helps the rest of the environment around her. So the Heath Aster is not just a host for the pearl crescent butterfly. It is also a host for different kinds of moths. And it is a very important food source for the end of the year butterflies, especially the monarch who needs to eat and eat and eat so they get all the strength they need to migrate to Mexico. This is a late bloomer, and that means that it's offering nectar through the fall, and it's beautiful to have out there when everything else is starting to turn brown. It doesn't just help those butterflies, though. It also helps to feed wasps and bees. So on a Heath Aster, you could see a host of different kinds, a whole variety of different kinds of bees nectaring from this aster species. And along with that, you're also going to get other pollinators like beetles and flies. So if you're really starting to get into insects, this is one I would suggest to put into your yard because it attracts a lot more than just this pearl crescent butterfly. But we have different things in Ohio that aren't insects, don't we? We have things like white-tailed deer. White-tailed deer eat this plant. We also have cottontail rabbit. Cottontail rabbit will eat this plant. And surprisingly enough, wild turkey will eat the seeds of this plant. So when you're planting your garden, you don't just have to think about the butterflies. You can look at this big picture and feed a whole host of different species. So this one is one of my favorites. I did grow 2 containers of this one this year so that we can get it into more parts of the park. And again, that one, it starts out looking like grass and then it gets nice and tall and it will bloom for a long, long time in the fall. So hopefully some of you could get out to the lake and see our progress. We are a Monarch Park USA, which means that we have just dedicated our gardens. We're taking out hostas, we're taking out tulips and beautiful things that you like to have in your yard, but we're replacing it with plants for our butterflies, our turkey, our deer. So we want to make our park as natural and native as possible. And I'm going to do that with this Heath Aster now that I know just how much it actually helps our species in Ohio as a whole. So Alyssa, do we have questions?
We do. Let's see. We have one. How long are caterpillars in a chrysalis? Did you hear that?
Yes, I was looking, I'm trying to see if Cindy wants that or if I should take it.
Well, you know, I imagine too, that is a question that would depend on what species it is. But monarchs, it's about 12 days or so that a monarch is in the chrysalis. But I think with other species, that figure would be a little bit different, perhaps. In fact, I believe I think some of the butterflies or skippers, definitely moths, overwinter as chrysalis or cocoon, which if you have a butterfly, it's a chrysalis. If you have a moth, it's a cocoon. And a lot of the species do overwinter in that stage. So we have species overwinter as eggs, overwinter as larvae or caterpillars, overwinter as pupa or cocoon chrysalis, and some that overwinter as adults. Are there any other questions?
Yes. So we had a viewer ask, where can we get more information about gardening for our butterflies? And I did send them the link to our Division of Wildlife's resources, the milkweed and monarchs, and the butterfly and skipper field guide. But do you, Mandy or Cindy, or even Jenna, do you have any other suggestions of where folks can get great info?
Well, I do have a couple books, but I honestly, I've been looking at butterflies for so long, I'm not sure if these are currently in production, but one of them is called the Family Butterfly Book. So it's got activities and projects and talks about 40 of the favorite North American species. That's Rick McCullough. And that is from Story Books. I don't know. Do you need ISBN numbers? Would that be helpful?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, another book, and this book, the Butterfly Book, it is by Lillian and Donald Stokes. This book actually has pages of larval foods and nectar foods that the butterflies like. So it's a good, a guide for different host plants and nectar plants.
Okay, I'm gonna send all of us live here, so we're all on the same screen.
I tried as well, Alyssa. I did the screen share again. I'm not sure if it helped you or if I should try something different. But before we went live today, we were actually having a discussion about this question, and Cindy had shared with me one of the books that she had read, and recently I had just purchased this book by Christopher Klein. He is the gentleman that runs Butterfly Ridge. And this is his second book that I know of about how to grow native plants. There's his other one. Thank you, Cindy. Butterfly Gardening with Native Plants. How to Attract and Identify Butterflies was his first one. And then this is his second one. If you plant it, they will come. These are filled with, this one has a lot of his statistics in it, which shows that what he does works. And I really have enjoyed reading that while I've been on my stay-at-home order. This was the first new book that came, and I'm very grateful for that. Plus, he's an Ohio writer.
Mandy and Cindy, we had somebody ask, why do butterflies like milkweed?
You know, for the monarch, it is its protection, because the milkweed plant has cardiac glycosides in it, which are a sort of toxin. So when the caterpillar eats that leaf, it fills its body up with a toxin that keeps it protected from some of the species that would want to eat it. It would be toxic to them or poisonous, and that toxin transfers over into the adult butterfly. So it is a protective thing for that caterpillar.
Awesome. Jenna, did you have anything?
Yeah, there was another question asked, and this is for either Cindy or Mandy, because I know you both know this. What are the differences between the butterflies that you would see in your garden during the summer and the ones that migrate?
Oh, okay, I can answer that question. So the monarchs that we have in our gardens in the summer are not the same monarchs that leave our gardens in the fall. But starting in mid-August, approximately, our monarchs that are hatched out at that time, that come out of the chrysalis at that time, do not have the mating instinct. They have a migration instinct. So they will begin their journey south at that time. And those monarchs will live for approximately 9 months. They will journey slowly or quickly down to Mexico, the ones at least from the eastern half of the United States. The western half of the United States migrates to the base of California, to the southernmost end of California. But they will migrate down to Mexico, approximately 2,000 miles from Ohio here, and they will overwinter there in the oil mill trees. And then maybe the third or fourth generation after that pair or that butterfly that makes it to Mexico will be the butterfly that we see up here in the summer, in the early summer. If they hatch out in the early summer, they're going to mate, lay eggs, and die. But if they hatch out at the end of summer, they're going to migrate to Mexico, if they can make it all that way without all the different problems that can meet them along the way.
Cindy, we just got a question from Sophia who asks, how many butterflies have you raised?
Oh, that's a very good question. And we're close to 1,000, I think. We had a really banner year a couple of years ago where we raised over 300. And at that time, I knew that they would probably not go on the endangered species list for migrating, for the migratory phenomenon, which they were considered for that for several years. But in, I think, spring of 2019, they made the decision that they didn't need to do that because concerned citizens, that's all you people out there and me and us, we heard the call and we got that milkweed planted, because without the milkweed in lots of different locations, it's a fragmented situation and the butterflies cannot survive. They have to be able to get to the point where they're going to lay their eggs. So they need to have milkweed along the way. So we need to make sure that the fields aren't getting sprayed heavily with pesticides, that we're planting pockets of milkweed throughout the country, and we're giving that monarch butterfly a great chance so that we can see these flyers all the way to Mexico for years to come.
So we have one more question that just popped up. How long are painted lady butterflies in the eggs? And I guess that would apply to all butterflies, but how long do they stay in their eggs before they hatch?
Do you want to get that one, Mandy?
I have never raised painted ladies, but I don't believe that it could be much longer. The monarch goes into the egg and it's only in there, depending on weather, for 3 to 5 days. So I know that painted ladies are one of the ones that many people you can purchase at places like COSI, or some nature centers sell kits to raise painted ladies, and it comes with like a little bit of mush in the bottom of the container, and those caterpillars will eat that mush, and that's really just their host plant made into a mixture so that you don't have to have the plant in your yard to help raise. I'm not positive on how different that egg cycle is for that species. I'm trying to look it up. It's the same, 3 to 5 days in the egg. That was a good question. I like to have to look things up and learn new things. So thank you for that.
Good, thank you.
I can't hear you.
You're muted, Alyssa.
Thanks. Still getting used to this whole virtual, technology stuff here, but I didn't want to forget to mention that earlier, one of the questions that Mandy asked, and we had several of you answer, was about, it was which one of these is the monarch butterfly? Everybody was so smart and got the first two questions right before that, but there was actually a 50-50 split on this one between C and D. So Mandy, I don't know if you wanted to quickly touch on that before we wrap it up here, but I didn't want to forget to tell you.
I would love to. So one of the other authors here in Ohio is Kylie Baumel. I'm probably butchering her last name. She wrote this book about the monarch. She also does tours down in Mexico where she takes people. And I want to show you this photo of the monarch in her book. So you can see this monarch here. Its wings are it has a lot of stripes, just like the butterfly in the answer for D. So the difference, this monarch was C, and the viceroy butterfly was D. A viceroy is going to have a line across the stripes on the bottom of its wing. You can see the line on that butterfly both when the wings are open. So here in her book, we have a butterfly, a monarch, no stripes on those wings. And then here you can see the viceroy. See those stripes on the back of those butterfly wings? And the reason that these two butterflies look so much alike is an amazing feat of evolution. The monarch, when a bird bites into it or any other kind of predator bites into the caterpillar or the butterfly, it tastes gross. And nothing wants to eat that monarch. It really tastes awful. So the viceroy has an adaptation where through evolution, they have made themselves look just like that monarch butterfly. That's a type of camouflage, really, if you think about it. So when a viceroy caterpillar is fluttering by and that bird sees it, the bird isn't looking for that little stripe on the back of those wings. That bird is going to go, "Ooh, I'm not eating that. It's going to taste gross." And that helps that viceroy survive. So that's one of my favorite. I'm glad that we had half and half get that wrong. It happens more often than not. So for those of you who got it right, good job, because Cindy and I were really trying to trick you up on that one.
Okay. So I want to wrap it up here and just want to thank you all for joining, but also if you're going to start raising butterflies after today, or if you raise them now, please take a picture or a video and post it on social media and tag at OhioDNR. We would love to see them, and hashtag Ohio Protects Pollinators. So we can have everything in one place for this webinar series. But thank you for joining, and we hope to see you for part 3, where we will be talking about bees. Mandy will be back with us, and Jenna will be back helping me moderate. We'll also be joined by naturalist John Hickenbottom, and they'll give you all the buzz about bees. Also, if you missed parts of this and you want to watch it back, you can find it on our YouTube channel, and it's OhioDNR Field Notes, I believe. You can also go to our Facebook page, visit ohiodnr.gov, and we have a digital discoveries page where you can find the link to the YouTube channel with all these webinars as well as short, really fun, interesting videos on all sorts of topics. We also have fun activities for kids and families, and even 360-degree virtual tours of some of our parks, which is super cool. So thanks again, and we hope to see you next week, Wednesday at 4, to talk about bees. Thanks, everyone.
See ya. Thank you.